Two men. Same face. Same voice. Same hands. But only one of them was allowed to exist. For 22 years, the world believed that Daniel Cross had only one son. A brilliant, ruthless, self-made billionaire named Adrian Cross, the man who built a trillion-rupee empire from a single garage workshop. But Adrian Cross was not alone when he was born. He had a twin brother. A brother the world was never told about. A brother who was quietly erased from every photograph, every birth record, every family memory. Until one rainy evening, 22 years later, a man walked into Adrian Cross's glass tower in the middle of a shareholder meeting, wearing the exact same face. The room went silent. Security didn't move. Even Adrian, the man who never showed fear in front of cameras, dropped his pen. Because staring back at him was himself. This is the story of two brothers separated by one impossible choice, and what happens when the truth finally comes home. Stay with me till the end, because the final twist in this story is something you will not see coming. To understand why this moment shook an entire empire, we have to go back to the night these two boys were born. Daniel and Mira Cross were not always rich. Before the empire, before the skyscrapers, they were a struggling couple living above a small hardware shop, barely paying rent, dreaming of something bigger. When Mira gave birth, the doctor delivered surprising news: twins. Two healthy baby boys. But joy quickly turned into fear. The family business was drowning in debt. A powerful investor had offered Daniel a life-changing deal: funding, resources, a future, but only if Daniel could prove he was a man of complete focus. A man with no distractions, no complications, no burdens holding him back. The investor's words were simple and cold. One heir. One legacy. Simplicity wins in business, Daniel. Confusion loses. Desperate, afraid, and blinded by ambition, Daniel Cross made a decision that would haunt his family for the next 2 decades. He kept one son. And the other, he gave away. Quietly. Secretly. To a distant relative in a small town, far from the city lights, far from the world his brother would one day rule. The official story the family told everyone, relatives, friends, even young Adrian himself, was that his twin had died shortly after birth. No funeral photos. No grave anyone could visit. Just a story, repeated so many times that even Daniel almost believed it himself. And Adrian Cross grew up believing he was an only child. He never knew that somewhere out there, a boy with his exact face was growing up in a completely different world, a world of struggle, of hard labor, of nobody ever telling him he mattered. That boy's name was Ray. While Adrian was being enrolled in the finest private schools, learning about mergers and acquisitions before he even understood algebra, Ray was waking up at 5 a.m. to help on a farm 200 kilometers away. He didn't know he had a twin. He didn't know his real parents' names. All he was ever told was that his mother could not keep him, and that he should be grateful someone took him in. Grateful. For a childhood with no birthday parties. No warm words. No one who looked at him and said, "You remind me of someone." Ray grew up quiet, observant, and quietly brilliant, the kind of intelligence that goes unnoticed because no one ever gave it a stage. He fixed radios for the neighbors. He taught himself to repair engines by watching mechanics work for free, standing at the edge of their garages, absorbing everything. He never had money for proper school beyond a certain age, so he taught himself through library books and second-hand manuals, night after night, by the light of a small kerosene lamp. Meanwhile, across the country, Adrian Cross's name was becoming known in business magazines. He built his first company at 22. By 30, he had reshaped an entire industry. By 40, Adrian Cross wasn't just a name, it was a brand of power, precision, and success. Photographers followed him. Interviewers praised his natural instinct for business. Adrian believed, truly believed, that his success came from talent alone, from being uniquely gifted. He had no idea that far away, a man with the exact same mind, the exact same instincts, was solving problems just as brilliant, but with none of the opportunity. Same blood. Same brain. Two completely different worlds. This is often the hardest truth in life. Talent is common. Opportunity is not. And for 22 years, one twin lived proof of what opportunity can build, while the other lived proof of what the world reveals. Every secret, no matter how carefully buried, eventually finds a crack. For Daniel and Mira Cross, that crack appeared the day Mira fell seriously ill. Lying in a hospital bed, faced with her own mortality, Mira could no longer carry the guilt she had buried for over 2 decades. She had spent every night since that decision replaying it in her mind, wondering about the boy she gave away, wondering if he was even alive. She called for Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper, and told him one sentence that would eventually shatter everything. "I need to know if our son is still alive before I go." Daniel, now in his late 60s, wealthy beyond imagination but hollow in every way that mattered, finally agreed. He hired a private investigator, quietly, carefully, using an alias, terrified that the press might connect his empire to the secret he'd hidden for 22 years. It took the investigator 4 months to trace records through adoption papers, town registries, and old hospital archives. And then, one afternoon, the investigator sent a single photograph to Daniel's private phone. Daniel opened it in his office, alone. He stared at the image for nearly 10 minutes without moving. Because the young man in that photo, dressed in a worn work jacket, standing beside an old motorcycle he had clearly rebuilt by hand, had Adrian's exact face. Same jawline. Same eyes. Same slight tilt of the head when concentrating. It was like looking at a photograph of his son from an alternate life, the life Adrian could have lived if fate had made a different choice. Daniel didn't tell Adrian right away. He wasn't ready. 22 years of silence isn't something you undo in a single conversation. Instead, he did something quieter first. He arranged to meet Ray himself. Ray had no idea who this well-dressed older man was when he arrived at the small garage where Ray worked, asking pointed questions about his childhood, his adoptive family, his birth records. At first, Ray was suspicious, understandably. Wealthy strangers didn't usually show up asking personal questions in his part of the world unless they wanted something. But there was something in the old man's eyes. A grief. A guilt he couldn't hide, no matter how composed his voice tried to stay. Finally, Daniel said the words he had rehearsed 100 times but still couldn't say without his voice breaking. "I think I am your father." Ray didn't respond right away. He simply stood there, wrench still in hand, processing a sentence that rearranged his entire understanding of his own life. 22 years of being told he was given up because his birth mother couldn't keep him. 22 years of quietly believing he wasn't wanted. And now, standing in front of him, was a man confirming that he had, in fact, been chosen to be given away, not out of necessity, but out of ambition. Ray didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply asked one question, calm and cutting. "Do I have any siblings?" Daniel hesitated. And in that hesitation, Ray already understood the answer. "You have a twin brother," Daniel finally admitted. "His name is Adrian." Ray had heard that name before. Everyone had. Adrian Cross wasn't just a name, he was a headline, a symbol of success plastered across business channels and magazine covers. Ray looked down at his own oil-stained hands, then back at the man who called himself his father. "So while I was fixing broken engines to survive," Ray said quietly, "my brother was building an empire with the life that should have been mine too." Daniel had no answer for that. There wasn't one that would make it right. For weeks after that meeting, Ray wrestled with an impossible question: what do you do when you discover the family that abandoned you is also the family capable of changing your entire life? Part of him wanted nothing to do with them. Why should he walk into a world that never wanted him in the first place? But another part of him, the quiet, curious part that had spent his whole life solving problems no one gave him credit for, wanted to know the truth. Not for the money. Not for the empire. He wanted to look his brother in the eyes and understand what kind of man had his stolen opportunities turned him into. So Ray made a decision that would shake Cross Industries to its foundation. He agreed to meet Adrian, not privately, not quietly, but directly at Adrian's own headquarters, during a company event where the entire executive board would be present. Why publicly? Because Ray understood something instinctively. Secrets protected by silence stay powerful only as long as no one dares to speak. He wasn't interested in being hidden again. Daniel begged him to reconsider, worried about scandal, worried about the company's stock price, worried about everything except, perhaps, doing the right thing sooner. But Ray had spent 22 years being controlled by other people's decisions. This time, the choice would be his. The video's opening scene brings us here. When Ray walked into that glass tower and stood face to face with Adrian in front of the entire board, it wasn't just a family reunion. It was the collapse of a story Adrian had believed about himself for his entire life. Adrian had always credited his success purely to his own brilliance. In interviews, he'd said things like, "I built this from nothing. No one helped me. No one handed me anything." But standing in front of him was undeniable proof that nothing was never really true. He'd had private schools, financial backing, a stable home, a name that opened doors before he even knocked. Ray had none of that, and yet built a mind just as sharp, just as capable, simply without a stage to prove it. The boardroom didn't erupt into shouting, as many expected. Instead, something quieter and far more powerful happened. Adrian, visibly shaken, asked everyone to leave the room except Ray and their father. For the first time in 22 years, the three of them sat together. No cameras, no publicists, no rehearsed statements. Adrian's first words were not business-related at all. He simply asked, "Were you happy? Growing up, I mean. Were you okay?" It wasn't guilt disguised as concern. It was genuine. Because despite everything, the two brothers shared something no one else in that building could understand. The exact same blood, the exact same origin, split apart by one decision they never got to make. Ray answered honestly, "I survived. I built what I could with what I had. But I always wondered why I wasn't enough to keep." That sentence broke something in the room. Daniel, the man who had built an empire through hard bargains and cold decisions, finally admitted the full truth out loud: the investor's demand, the fear, the ambition that made him choose convenience over both of his sons. Adrian didn't defend his father. He simply turned to Ray and said something that would define the rest of this story. "You didn't get the empire. But you got something I never learned: how to build something out of nothing, without anyone's help. That's not a weakness. That might be the only real skill in this entire company." What happened next surprised everyone who followed the story. Instead of a bitter legal battle over inheritance, which many expected, given the scale of the fortune involved, Adrian did something unexpected. He offered Ray a place in the company. Not as a hidden secret. Not as charity. But as an equal partner, using the very skills Ray had built through struggle: hands-on engineering, resourcefulness, and an instinct for solving problems with limited resources, skills the company's polished executives had lost touch with entirely. Ray, for his part, didn't ask for a symbolic title or handout. He asked to start in the workshop, proving his value the way he always had, through work, not through blood relation. Within a year, Ray's practical innovations on the manufacturing side saved the company millions and modernized processes that had stayed outdated for a decade. The public loved the story. Business press ran headlines about the hidden twin who out-engineered Silicon Valley. But more importantly, something private had healed. For the first time, Ray had something he never had growing up: recognition earned entirely on his own terms, standing beside the brother he'd never known. And Adrian, for the first time in his life, understood that success isn't proof of superiority. It's often simply proof of the doors that were left open for you. This story isn't really about billionaires, or twins, or secret family drama. It's about a truth many people forget: talent exists everywhere. Opportunity does not. Two men born minutes apart from the exact same parents ended up living completely different lives, not because one was smarter or more capable, but because of one decision made when they were too young to have any say in it. Ray's return wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about claiming what he felt he was owed. It was about finally being seen. And maybe that's the real lesson here, that behind every self-made success story, there are often invisible advantages we never talk about. And behind every person who seems to have less, there might be a brilliance simply waiting for its first real chance. So to sum it all up, two twin brothers, separated by one desperate choice, grew up in two completely different worlds, one built by privilege, one built by pure grit. When they finally came face to face, it wasn't anger that changed everything. It was honesty. If this story moved you, remember this: your current circumstances don't define your potential. Sometimes the world just hasn't given you your moment yet. Keep building. Keep learning. Your chapter is still being written. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button for more powerful, real-life inspired stories like this one every week. Drop a comment below telling me which brother you related to more, Adrian or Ray. And don't forget to like this video so more people can discover this story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.